speaker today. And our speaker today is Vicky Robertson from the University College London School of Pharmacy Library. She will no doubt introduce herself in more detail to you. Now, we're going to press the record button. If it hasn't already, it has been. So the record button is in. The session is being recorded. Can people please make sure they've got their mics muted, and you can either have your cameras off or you can leave them on, it doesn't matter. But please do, now that you've used the chat to tell us what the weather is like, so you know the function, put any questions in there as we go along. And Hong, Anne and Paul, who are also from the HLG, will be here as well to provide any support. Without further ado, over to you, Vicky. Just unmute yourself. There we go.
Thank you, Daniel, for that introduction. And it's just turned sunny again here where I am, so hopefully it will stay that way. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen, which hopefully will work. If anyone, if you can let me know that you can give me a thumbs up. Thank you, everyone. So just trying to see if I can get it on a different view. It doesn't seem to be going into view. Can everybody see the slides, or are they?
The slides are perfectly visible, Vicky.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Thanks.
This will work fine.
Yes, I'm Vicky Robertson, and thank you for coming to this Lunch and Learn webinar. Oh, there's in the chat, some people are saying they can't see them. Yes, as Daniel said, I'm a member of this CILIP Health Libraries Group Continuing Professional Development Panel, and my topic of my presentation today is about presentation skills. So my aim is to give some tips, tricks, and also my experience is good and bad, obviously positive and negative. And for those of you who haven't presented before or who are new to presenting, I hope you find this session really, really useful. For those of you who have presented before or have a lot of experience presenting, this may be a refresher session for you. And apologies if I'm teaching grandmother how to suck eggs, but I hope you find it useful hearing about some of my experiences as well. At the end of the presentation, after I've finished, if there's time, there's obviously time for questions. I was hoping that attendees might want to share some of their experiences, and also if they've got tips and tricks in addition to what I've covered in the presentation. So if I move on to the next slide, what I'm aiming to cover is a brief introduction to myself and my background, and then go into talking about planning presentations, designing them, practicing them, which is obviously an important element, about delivering presentations, after what happens after the presentation, and then time for any questions. And what I will say is presentation skills are very generic. They can apply to work-related presentations that you may have to give in front of colleagues. It relates to conference presentations that you have to give in front of audiences you may know, you may not know, and also personal presentations as well as job interviews. Obviously I've had quite a few job interviews I've been for that I've had to give presentations, so I'm going to talk generically about presentation skills. So just to emphasize that point. So an introduction to me. Sorry, I'm just going to hide. That's better. Sorry, whoops, I'm going back. So I have 30 plus years in libraries, public and academic. I started off in a public library when I left school as an arts and libraries assistant, and did a course where I had to start giving presentations with groups and also solo presentations. And I've worked in academic libraries for most of my career, as a senior library assistant and assistant librarian, and my current role. And again, I've had to give presentations as part of those roles related to job interviews and also to colleagues about my work. I was working on projects. So I've, quite a lot of experience. Both my degrees are in library and information management, so I don't have any other subject background to as some of my work colleagues do. They have humanities degrees, some of them have got science degrees. My current role is as deputy librarian, as Daniel said, at the UCL School of Pharmacy Library. I've worked at the library since 2003, so 22 years coming up to. And again, my experiences, I've had to give work presentations to my colleagues. I've had them as part of job interviews. I've had personal presentations I've had to give. I've helped out at sort of sessions at the School of Pharmacy and also conferences as well. So I hope I can share some of my experiences. One question I have for attendees is, I know how I feel when I'm asked to undertake presentations, but I wondered if you'd like to put in the chat how you feel when you're asked to undertake a presentation. Does it fill you with dread? Does it fill you with anxiety? Or do you actually enjoy giving presentations? So if I give you a minute or so, a couple of minutes to put ideas in the chat. Looking at what's coming up at the moment, I can empathize with the feelings. One person saying they love it. Okay. Yeah, looking at thank you for all your comments and feedback. Looking at the comments that I'm seeing, a lot of people are saying nervous, terrified and anxious. A lot of people have put about it depends upon the audience and how prepared you are, which I can totally agree with. Again, some people saying they love it. Obviously, that's great to hear. I know personally, when I'm asked to undertake a presentation, I think my initial feelings are nervous and anxious. But also on the other hand, if I know what I'm presenting about, if I'm confident about the topic, if I know the audience, that helps sort of calm my nerves. If it's a job interview presentation, I've had experience of those where I've gone in feeling confident and they've not gone so well, and then I've gone in feeling really not that confident at all, and I've ended up getting the job. So again, it relates to how you are on the day. Yeah. And thank you, Emily, about putting in the chat about an article. Some people have have grown up from childhood being very confident public speaking. Some people are very shy, and you know they not very sort of happy about giving presentations. It just depends. But thank you for your comments. So when planning a presentation, successful presentations depend upon good preparation. So I've put some points here to consider. So the context of the presentation, is it for work colleagues? Is it non-work related? Is it a personal presentation that you're giving? Is it for a job interview? So you have to bear that in mind, what context you're doing the presentation related to. Your audience, obviously that's an important element about who will you be presenting to. Is it work colleagues that you've worked with for quite a long time and are very familiar with? Are you presenting to complete strangers that you have no idea about whether they know anything about the topic you're presenting on? If it's an interview panel, is it an internal interview you're going for, where you're likely to be interviewed by internal colleagues that you work with on a daily basis, or sort of senior managers who you may know, may be very familiar with? Or is it it's thinking about who you're presenting to, or is it at a conference? You may not know who the audience is. So you just have to think about that. How much do they know? So if you're giving the presentation at a conference, there may be attendees who know about what you're presenting about. There may be people in the who are attending the conference that know nothing. There may be people who know something, sort of, or very vague knowledge about what you're presenting. So again, you have to take that into consideration. Think about any acronyms that you use and try to explain them, what they are. Especially if you're giving a presentation at a conference, say the Health Libraries Group conference, there may be NHS attendees there may be non-NHS attendees who work in, say, higher education and are unfamiliar with some acronyms in the NHS. What will they be interested in? Obviously thinking, you're giving your presentation on your topic, or, if you're presenting at a job interview, think about what the audience might be interested in. The venue, if possible, check the venue where you're going to be presenting so that you know the setup and what resources are available, including audio visual, so that you know what to bring along and how long it might take you to set up. If it's a room you've never been in before, or a venue you've never been to before, try to get a look at it beforehand if possible, so that you're fully prepared for the day. And also check seating, and whether any flip charts or whiteboards are needed if you do need them, if you're planning to have activities. Identifying your key, researching the topic you're presenting on. Again, obviously, if you're going for a job interview, it's a good idea to research the workplace, your prospective workplace, or the workplace that you're going to the job interview for, and also researching topic that you're planning to present. Even if you're confident about the topic, it's still best to maybe still undertake some research. Identifying the key message. So what is your key message that you're trying to relay to the audience? And then planning content. So create an outline of your presentation and identify the points that contribute to the message you're trying to relay. So obviously, some presentations include an introduction, the main body of it, conclusion, and references. If you've referenced any evidence in your presentation, including information about references so that your audience can go and explore further after the presentation. And also including, obviously, thanks to the audience for listening, and obviously an invitation to ask questions. Timings, it's best to try and leave at least a few minutes at the end of the presentation to ask questions. for your audience to ask you. Visual aids, think when you're writing your presentation, think about visual aids you might use. So images, diagrams, statistics or video clips, and obviously you may need to think about copyright related to them. So using copyright-free images. And practice, again, that's an important element, and some people prefer to practice by themselves, or it's a case of in my experience, I've tended to practice by myself, but also ask someone to listen to me practice so that they can point out anything I may need to change, and get feedback from them. From experience, my own experience, I've found over practicing, I have found led to problems on the day. For a job interview I went for, I practiced so much I could literally memorize my presentations sort of slides, and when I got into the room for presenting, I'd practiced so much, it just went wrong on the day. But I learned from that lesson and moved. The next presentation I gave, I learned from the previous one. So designing the presentation, thinking about designing a well-designed presentation will help you to get your message across to your audience clearly, and it'll ensure that the audience get the most out of your presentation and won't be distracted at all. Sometimes a poorly designed presentation can confuse audiences, and also it doesn't showcase what your knowledge is effectively either. So thinking about presentation software, so are you using, say, PowerPoint, other software such as Keynote, Prezi, or any other alternatives? If you've not used the software before that you're being asked to present with, set aside time to learn it and feel comfortable with it so that you can, find out any technical issues or any issues that may occur. You feel comfortable being able to troubleshoot anything that could happen. In my experience, I had a work-related session quite a few years back now. It was an in-house session where we were told we had to give a presentation on a topic of our own choice. So I chose to present about my dog, which is he's really important to me. And we were given 5 minutes to present, and we were not allowed to use PowerPoint. So a lot of us used flip charts, and it was trying to get into the mindset of, no, I'm not using PowerPoint. I've got to write it down on paper and plan it on paper. And it was quite an interesting experience. One person who was on the same course chose to do a 5-minute presentation about origami, and also chose to ask us, the other attendees, to undertake origami as well. Make it easy to read. So obviously make sure that your your audience can read it and understand what you're showing them. Don't make the text too small so that people have to squint and use a magnifying glass. And also about not putting too much text on a slide so that it might distract the audience by them reading rather than they're paying attention to the speaker or you speaking. Accessibility is important, so making sure your presentation fits accessibility guidelines and running your presentation slides through an accessibility checker is important as well, because obviously, yes, accessibility is important in everyday life. Presenting data, I've put examples here, but when presenting data on your slides, consider about the layout of the data that you're presenting. So whether it be graphs, tables, bar charts, pie charts, using clear titles to illustrate the data that you're presenting. And I've been caught out by this: present only the data you're discussing rather than all of the data you have collected. And obviously keeping things simple. I think out by presenting too much data in the past. And I've learnt my lesson. I've learnt as I've gone along. The examples I've put here in the slides, the first one is Occam's Razor blog post by Avinash Kaushnik, and it's got in there about advice about ways to present data in presentations. And the second one, second example I found was from the University of Manchester, a presentation design tutorial about ways in which to use design in your presentation. So please take a look at those. I had a look at them and certainly found them useful as well. The next element is practicing the presentation. So I've put practice, 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 as I've said. Practice makes perfect when it comes to presentations. It will help you with your timings and highlight any issues you may have with the flow of your presentation, and also your structure as well. As I said before, I've had situations where I've over practiced and it hasn't gone so well on the day. Timing obviously is the important element, as I said, tied in with the practice. Most people, when they're asked to give presentations, I've certainly colleagues I've worked with feel very, very nervous. And I always say to them to try and approach presentations with a positive mindset if possible. I mean, obviously, sometimes you think you feel positive and then you get in, especially with job interviews, you get into the room in front of the interview panel and your mind goes blank. I've certainly had it. What I would say is know what you want to achieve when you're planning and practicing, and that should help manage your nerves as well. Peer review for feedback. Basically, I've undertaken this many times, and I've also been a peer reviewer for previously for some conference attendees who were presenting for the first time at a conference as part of a session Health Libraries Group CPD panel ran. We asked presenters who were presenting at the conference for the first time to them peer review. So yeah, basically I had someone present to me who was from an NHS trust library. I'm from higher education, and I sort of basically met up with them face to face. They did their presentation in front of me, and I provided the feedback. My feedback mainly to them was that they'd used some acronyms with NHS that I wasn't aware of. So I said to them, you know, it may not just be me, sort of, you know, there may be others attending who may not be aware of what the acronyms stand for. So sort of explaining, and I gave them really constructive, positive feedback as well. I've put about writing cue cards or notes for prompts. I know some colleagues that I've worked with previously like to have a script when they're doing a presentation. Obviously, if you're referring to a script, it can make the delivery stilted, but also if someone raises their hand during the presentation or asks you a question, you may think, I've lost my place in the script. What I've tended to do in presentations that I've given online and face-to-face is write prompts down on cue cards, sort of keywords related to the slides and sort of just notes for myself. So yeah, making brief notes, it's, you know, and also going into a job interview, you know, you may have some notes related to your presentation that may come up during the interview, so that may be as a help as well. And then we come to delivering the presentation. So again, there's several options here. Delivering a presentation face-to-face as part of a conference, as part of a job interview in front of colleagues, or via online, via Teams or via Zoom. Sorry about that. If you're delivering in person, Make sure you face the audience and don't talk to the screen. I remember at university I was in lectures, and one of the lecturers would just talk to the screen and not to us as students. And you know, a lot of the students lost attention, so it was quite, you know, difficult. But yeah, face the audience and don't talk to the screen. Making eye contact with the audience is important. Don't just, and also if it's obviously in person, try not to focus on one person. Make sure you engage with the whole audience, so facing the audience. With me, from my experience, I've had issues with eye contact in the past, even when giving presentations as a sort of young adult, and in adult life. And I realized it was, I was diagnosed as being on the autistic spectrum disorder 2 years ago, and I was told by a medical professional that they were explaining sometimes my lack of eye contact they felt was down to my autism. I'm trying to overcome that. Talk clearly and loudly and make sure your audience can hear you, and remember to breathe, and also to pace yourself. So if you're talking too quickly, people, if they're trying to make notes, if they're listening to your presentation and trying to make notes, they may, you know, be scribbling and not sort of, you know, hearing what you've said properly because you're talking too quickly. And body language, I've always had it sort of told to me about try to have confident body language when you're giving a presentation, whether it be in a job interview, to colleagues, or at a conference, as it will help you to feel confident in yourself, and it'll also help the mirror image of your audience. If you're feeling confident, you're hopefully your confidence will rub off on your audience. So yeah, to think about that. I mean, one thing I got told a number of years ago was try to imagine, if you're giving a presentation at a conference, try to imagine the audience naked. And someone told me that would calm my nerves. Personally, I hated the thought of that. It was, for me, I just thought, this is a bit weird to say this, and it's never a concept. It's just the whole point of a presentation is to engage and respect your audience, and not to mock them in any way. And yeah, I think that was a very outdated sort of method or theory that I was told. I've never experienced it myself. I've never gone down that route. So after the presentation, whether it be a job interview, whether it be work in front of work colleagues or at a conference, take a deep breath and relax. I mean, you've done the presentation, it's now over. What I would say is you gain experience from every presentation you do. So again, it's like, the next point, reflecting on how you think you did. Take time afterwards yourself to reflect on how you felt it went, and things you might think to yourself, next time I will improve that, or next time I will consider that. I hadn't considered that this time round, but something for the next time. And obviously, if you go for a job interview, you can ask for feedback, the interview panel. Don't be afraid to ask for feedback from your audience, whether it be your colleagues, session attendees, or, as I said just now, the interview panel. It will be useful for you for the future. I've certainly asked for feedback from presentations I've given to work colleagues, and at conferences, and also with internal and external job interviews. And I found it has been really, really useful. It has been really, really useful, and I have gained from it. I have learned from past mistakes or past errors, that I've improved the next time round. So just things to think about. I was going to say that's all I've got to say for now. Thank you very much for listening to me. And has anyone got any questions? I'll stop sharing. Sorry.
Well, I was just thinking, do you want to go on to the... No, we'll go on to the final slide later.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So has anybody got any questions at all? Now, Beata said, what do you mean by a personal presentation? Interesting question.
When I say personal presentation, I had to present to, when I was getting my diagnosis of autism, I had to give a small presentation about myself to them. And I'd obviously never met them before. When I mean personal presentations, I think it's to say, yeah, not work colleagues, not a conference, not a job interview, sort of, you know, I've done presentations for friends, not that I do it on a regular basis, but yeah, I think yeah, I've had to, when I say personal presentations, it's things that are outside of work or conferences or job interviews. But yeah, I had to give a presentation to an assessor who was about to diagnose that I was on the spectrum, just a bit about myself and sort of answering some questions. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, that's great. Now, Carl had his hand up first. Carl, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah. Just a couple of observations. Thank you very much, Victoria. Very interesting. Couple of things. Things like just the kind of basics of like having branding on slides. A lot of organisations are quite kind of corporate, and they're quite keen on having you know, all their branded logos on stuff, and I think sometimes that can be a little bit distracting. That can be a challenge. So that's just a kind of a point, and I take your point there. Another thing, if you do quite a lot of presentations in auditoriums and so on, sometimes they give you a microphone to use. That's a challenge. A lot of people do this, and then they go like this. So they're not actually looking at the microphone. They start pointing with the microphone. So you can't hear what they're saying. Often microphones don't work. Personal experience, don't use them unless you need to use them. That would be my advice. And also, just one more, the tech issues as well. Sometimes you go to a conference or a presentation, symposium, whatever, and you know, you've got everything ready, you're ready to go, and the tech doesn't work. So make sure you've got a plan B, make sure you've got like a paper copy of your notes or something. That would be my recommendation on stuff like that. But I do like what you've done. I also like the idea that you should keep the slides, the text and the content of your slides very simple, keep it to a minimum. In my opinion, the slides really are of kind of secondary importance to what you're saying. I think people sometimes are a bit kind of too focused on what's actually on the slides, to the point that they are almost kind of redundant in the presentation. I think the balance needs to be the other way, in my opinion. You as the individual need to be the focus of the presentation. Certainly most of the key information should come from you and just the key points on the slides. Okay, thanks. So that's my two penneth. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. That's really, really useful, and sort of, yeah, I mean, technology not working, I've had that before. I had it once at a job interview where I knew it was an internal room that I was being interviewed in, and I thought I knew the technology, and on the day PowerPoint just stopped working. Luckily I had a paper copy of slides, and I'd got printouts of them, which I managed to give the interview panel, and I had to give it without PowerPoint. So I totally agree with that point. And microphones, I must admit, when I've given presentations in lecture theatres to students, that I've done previously, I've tended not to use the microphone and tried to. I can be loud when I want to be. Sort of, I've tried to, you know, echo, sort of like, you know, not have to use the microphone and relay my voice quite loud to them. And again, what you were saying about branding of slides, yeah, I've been at conferences where certainly the colours and the vibrancy of the slides has sort of, you know, has taken my attention, and sort of I found myself very quickly being slightly distracted from the speaker, but then having to think, right, I've got to listen to them. The slides, you know, if they're going to circulate them afterwards, that will be fine. But no, thank you for that.
That's great. Thank you, Victoria. The first question that came on the chat was from Rebecca, who asks, do you have any tips for pacing your speech? I find the more nervous I am, the faster I speak.
Yeah, I've been in that situation quite a number of times. Sometimes when what I've tended to do when practicing is take my, you know, set my alarm for however long I'm due to speak, and then sort of obviously practice several times with my phone alarm, and then try and see if that helps excuse me, my pace. I mean, sometimes again I've practiced and got my pace of speech fine then, and then on the day I've tended to talk quite fast and then thought, oh no, I'm speeding through this. But yeah, I mean, obviously if you're nervous, you do tend to talk faster. It's to try and sort of, I suppose, when you're practicing, try and pace yourself then, and hope that, you know, however much you practice, it's like that on the day. But I think that's what I've learned.
Okay. Any other questions that we have? Oh yes, here we go. A presentation. Just a moment. Didn't quite get that. A presentation for an interview is not something I've had to do before, says Catherine. Any specific hints or tips for conquering nerves?
Yes, the job interviews that I've had, I mean, I can think of two experiences where I've had to give presentations. One of them was quite a number of years ago at it was actually a UCL site library before my current before I joined my current workplace, and they asked me to do a presentation about databases for nursing and allied health students. And again, excuse me, this was before PowerPoint and presentation software, so it was on overhead projection slides, and again, it was in front of people I didn't know, and I had done database training, but not as much as I would have liked to. And again, it sort of, I feel with that one, I presented well, but I felt afterwards I could have done better, sort of researching more about the databases. I'd used some of them, but not all of them that the site library was using. The other excuse me, example is that I've had to give a presentation about customer service to colleagues who ended up being my manager. I think because I knew them, my nerves were put at ease. With the first interview, I was very, very nervous, and I felt I hadn't researched the topic. The second presentation, customer service was the background I was working in at the time. And because I knew the audience, I felt that my nerves were, again, sort of put at ease. They, you know, they asked questions, and they obviously gave feedback afterwards. So I think it does, with a job interview, I think it's trying to do a lot of research on sort of what you're presenting about beforehand, and trying to calm your nerves on the day, sort of, you know, listening to mute. One of the job interviews was sort of in the morning, and before leaving home I listened to some music and felt that calmed my nerves. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Victoria. There's another question in the chat here before I move on to Hong An, which is this is a very specific one from Sian Evans. She's going to be giving a presentation for 5 minutes on health literacy on part of the Train the Trainer course. Any advice on how many slides she should have and how long she should talk about each slide?
Thanks for that question. I was, if it's for 5 minutes, I've always been told less is more. I know previously advice I was given when I was planning my 5-minute presentation for the session I did as part of my in-house sort of training with work, is they advised you to talk for at one stage somebody had said 1 minute per slide. Now again, it depends on what you're presenting on the slide. There could be variations of that. I've always been told you should have sort of a low number of slides, so that, and then obviously expand in your talking from them. 5 minutes, I think when I did my 5-minute presentation, I think I had with the flip chart excuse me, I think I had three flip chart papers, and part of the presentation I gave, the one that I was saying about where I used a flip chart and not PowerPoint because we weren't allowed to. One of my presentation slides was a t-shirt with a picture of my dog on, so that was one of my slides. So I think I had about four slides, as they say. I mean, whether anyone else has got any sort of variation on that, or any advice, I would say if you're doing 5 minutes, possibly three or four, like obviously an introduction slide and obviously an end slide, and then maybe 1 or 2 in the middle. Yeah, I was going to say, Carl, less than 10. I would say maybe 4 or 5, one slide, sort of, and then obviously trying to factor in time for questions. So if you're talking for 3 minutes, maybe leaving 2 minutes for questions. I hope that helps answer your question, Sienna.
Okay, so we've got a few bits of advice in the chat as well for people to have a look at, in terms of Catherine saying an overview slide and 3 contents, Carl saying less than 10. Just saying that in case anybody's got any excess needs and can't read the slides today. And Hong An's hand is up, so please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Vicky, for the presentation. It's really, really helpful, and I think, yeah, presentations are something that are just kind of part and parcel of working life, so it's something that we all have to do, whether we like to do it or not. Just to come in on the one about interview presentations, from the perspective of someone who is a recruiting manager, another thing I would say to think about why your panel have asked you to do a presentation. So if, for example, in the role description, part of the job is that you're going to be teaching, then actually that what they're probably likely to be using the presentation for is to assess like how well you assess your pedagogy skills. If like public speaking is part of the role, then they're probably using it to test that. That is like if they are using the presentation to kind of assess something that is related to the job description. So yeah, like thinking about it from that perspective also might help you prepare for it. And also from a nerves perspective, it's the one part of your interview where you know exactly what you're going to say. So take heart in that like hour or whatever you have of the interview. You know exactly what you're going to be doing for those 10 to 15 minutes, whereas in an interview you might not necessarily know what you're going to be asked. So so yeah, there's my positive spin on it.
So thanks Hong An. I totally agree about thinking obviously if you're in a job interview and it mentions in the role description about presentation skills, or as you say teaching, that could be, as you say, part of the assessment. It will sometimes say experience of undertaking presentations. I've seen that in role descriptions, and it will say application/interview. So again, if you're asked to give a presentation, you know that you're being assessed on that. Obviously, if they don't, if it's in the role description and it says application, they could still be assessing you they could be discreetly assessing you, thinking, oh, we didn't ask for a presentation, we didn't ask it as part of the interview, but sort of hearing, about how you present yourself to them.
Thank you for that. Do we have any more questions? How long have we got left before the end of this session?
I was going to say, or if anyone wants to put about any good or bad experiences that they're willing to share with with everyone, I'd be quite interested to hear. As I say, I've had good experiences and I've had sort of not so good experiences, but I have learned valuable lessons from those not so good presentations that I've taken. I've taken the feedback from it and then thought for the next presentation I'm asked to give, oh yes, last time this didn't go so well, this, I can do this better next time. But I'd be interested to hear if anyone has got any experiences they're willing to share.
I would say personally that sometimes you can over-rehearse, exactly as you say. And it's very important not to write everything down. It's tempting to write everything down or almost everything down, but you are more yourself if you don't. I can't give you an exact presentation example, but the last time I stood up and gave a sermon, which was 2 weeks ago, I gave a sermon at St Paul's, Alverthorpe. I wrote it on a piece of paper and I read it out, and people said, "Oh, nice sermon, Vicar." And then I was shuttled over to St Anne's to give the same sermon, and I'd left my sermon at St Paul's. So I said to the minister, "Well, I haven't got, well, you're going to have to do it from memory." So I've got this 20-minute sermon and I will do it from memory. And it was so much better the second time because the important stuff floated to the top. And all the little, well, this bit's important, we ought to mention that all fell off because you didn't think about it. So it really can be quite important, I think, to deliver. If you've already done the rehearsals, you've already done the homework, then in a way, you're always going to be made. So reading it on a piece of paper just isn't necessary anymore. It's in your head at that point. It's in your soul almost. Okay, that's just my 2 pence worth. Anybody else? Okay, Victoria, would you be able to share the final slide, please?
Yeah, I'll just do that. Oops.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. So First of all, thank you ever so much indeed, everybody, for attending the session today. And thank you for your rounds of applause for our excellent presenter on presentation skills. I can see you're getting some lovely feedback. There is more to happen. There are more courses going on and more events occurring with the HLG, and we're just going to mention a couple of things that are happening very, very soon. So the 10th of June is only 6 days away, and that's the HLG, sorry, the HLG's AGM, and that there will be a speaker, Sophie Randall from the Patient Information Forum, and hers will be focusing on misinformation, health information, equality, AI, and the Patient Information Forum tick scheme. Whether it really will focus on health information, misinformation, and AI depends on the AI summary that I got for saying that today. And then way in the future, but something to definitely put in your diary, is the International Congress on Medical Librarianship next year, which HLG is hosting, and that will be in the fair and bonny city of Glasgow in Scotland. The venue for the Commonwealth Games, but not actually during the Commonwealth Games, thank goodness, or the hotels will be through the roof. So we have a lot happening as well beyond those other training courses going on. So stay in touch, and thank you. Only just reminds for me to thank our speaker again for a magnificent session today. And thank you to everybody that's attended and given their feedback. Thank you again.
Thanks very much.